In this video, I'm going to show you how to completely disassemble a Glock 9mm. I'm going to include the magazine in that. We're going to take every possible piece out of and off of this Glock except for the rear sight, which I don't want to misadjust that. The tools you're going to need to completely disassemble your Glock: you're going to need a push pin tool. This is a Glock pin tool. If you don't have a Glock pin tool, you could use any pin punch set. Maybe a 3/32 is about the size that you're going to need. You're going to need kind of a smallish screwdriver, and that's for getting the magazine release out. Also, for that magazine release spring, you're going to need a good set of needle nose pliers. You may or may not need a small hammer. This isn't exactly small, but you might need a hammer to tap a few pins out. And this is an optional item. This is a bench block to help push pins out. You could use a roll of duct tape. You just need to get something to get the gun off of the table so the pin has a place to go. We're going to lock the slide back, verify there is no magazine and no round in the chamber. Double check it twice because we are going to pull the trigger in order to field strip the Glock. Point the gun in a safe direction, press the trigger. The trigger needs to be in the rear position in order to take the slide off. Pull the slide back slightly, pull down on the slide lock on both sides, move the slide right off the top. We're going to disassemble the slide first. Compress the recoil spring and guide rod, remove that. Then you can simply push up on the barrel, pull out the barrel. To disassemble the slide, the first thing we need to do is take off the slide cover plate right here. And the way we're going to do that, right here, you want to take your pin punch, put it right in this notch right here, and we're going to press down. And that's going to take pressure off of the spring that's pushing up against the slide cover. So we're going to press down and we're going to slide this at the same time. So put this in that slot, press down, and this cover will come right off. And you want to keep your thumb over there because there are some springs that might pop out. Next, we're going to remove the firing pin. Let's just pull this up like so. And this is the firing pin assembly, and this does come apart further. To take the firing pin apart, first of all, you want to have eye protection on because this is a fairly strong spring and you don't want it to go launching into your face. So when we take this apart, this spring cup is actually in two halves and they're pretty small pieces, so you want to be careful these things don't get launched across the room. So what we're going to do is grab onto this spring right below the black part here. Grab onto the spring and we're going to pull it down. It's a fairly strong spring and it might be a little bit painful on your fingers. So this can help if you want to grab it with a cloth of some sort or something like that. The other thing, when you press down, the pin might go down far, so you can push it up like that, and so either those cups are going to pop out like that, or once you expose them you can pull them off with your finger, and then once the cups are gone, gently release the spring and it'll come up like that. My one spring cup did end up on the floor, so just be careful about that. Pay attention to where they might go. So the firing pin then does just come out of this. This is called a spacer sleeve right here. So now your firing pin is completely disassembled. Okay, next we want to remove the extractor depressor plunger, which is this right here. So before you do that, make sure you put a finger over the firing pin safety plunger right here, because that's going to pop out when you pull this out. So pull this out, or I should say it might pop out, but it will pop out once you go down and pull out the extractor. So pull that out, it releases the firing pin plunger safety, which will now drop out, and it has a spring on there. This is the way it goes in there since you didn't see it fall out. So that removes every piece from the slide except for the front sight, which we'll take off now, and the cover for the optional red dot sight. If you are going to remove the front sight, but you will need a front sight removal wrench, which is a very shallow wrench with very narrow sides on it so it can fit in there. As you see, this is a very shallow screw head here and it's very close to the edge. So a needle nose might work for you, but this tool is going to make it a lot easier. So you just put that in there. The screw looks like that. Front sight just pops out. Front sight looks like that. So be careful with this. It's actually made of polymer and not metal. So that completes the disassembly of the Glock Slide. I'm not going to take the cover off for the red dot sight. If you're going to put a red dot on here, you'll have instructions on that red dot on how to do that. So for all intents and purposes, this is completely disassembled. All right, let's move on to the frame. All right, so I have an optional back strap added on here. So the only difference on this frame versus how the Glock came in the box is there's a little bit longer trigger housing pin in here. The original Glock came with a little bit shorter one, and you'll see that when I take that off. So the first thing we want to do on the frame disassembly is push out this pin, and to do that, I typically use a bench block just to hold the gun up in the air and give the pin a place to go. And you don't need this. You could use a roll of tape or 2 books or something like that. It's not really too important. Okay, so just get your push pin tool directly lined up with the pin and push down. And sometimes it helps to kind of move this pin around a little bit, get it started as it did there, and then just push that all the way down through. And there it is, sticking out the bottom there. That is what your trigger pin looks like when it's removed. All right, once that is removed, now the next thing you want to do is remove your locking block, which is right here. And you can use your push pin tool to just kind of get underneath that. Use it as a lever. And just kind of press down gently. And once that starts coming up, you can just grab that, kind of wiggle it out. Might be a little tight. And that comes out. And now your slide lock levers, which are ambidextrous on this model, that just lifts out nice and easy. Now before you can get your trigger and trigger assembly out, we do need to remove the trigger housing pin, which is right here. So just get your smart block or duct tape, and again, straight down through. This one comes out pretty easy. This pin is actually made of polymer, so it's not real robust, but it's certainly does the job. Right, if you have a beaver tail backstrap on there, that just comes off with a little bit of a sideways twist. And if you don't have that, then you're going to look like this, and you would have had a slightly shorter pin in the back here. Now, if you just put your finger underneath the ejector here and lift up gently, the entire trigger assembly will come out. Okay, next we're going to remove the slide lock and the slide lock spring underneath of that. And the way to get this out is you just need to push it all the way down, and then it will slide out the side of the firearm. All right, I'm going to push it down all the way with my thumbnail here, and then I'm going to gently push it out the side. Okay, now it's only part way out. Now you want to be careful of the spring. So now you can pull it out, but you want to put your thumb over top so that spring doesn't launch across the room. So there's your spring. Now you can pull that out. You're good to go. When we put this back in, there is a proper way to put it in, and we'll go over that in the reassembly video. We have one last thing to remove on the frame, and that is the magazine release or the magazine catch. Okay, the magazine catch, which is this plastic piece right here, moves back and forth, and then you have your magazine catch spring, which is just a short piece of spring steel right here. So to get this out, it's caught behind a little slot in the magazine catch. So you want to get a screwdriver in there and use some leverage, and you want to push it that way, and then kind of twist a little to bring it out and get it to end up in front of the magazine catch like that. Get a pair of needle nose pliers down in there, grab a hold of it, and then just pull it straight out. It comes right out of the bottom of that little notch in there. And once that happens, your magazine release falls right out, and it looks like that. So the spring ends up sitting in this slot right here, so we just kind of moved it out and in front. All right, now the frame is completely disassembled. We've taken everything out of the frame that can come out of the frame at this point. So one last thing is the trigger assembly. This does come apart. So your trigger and your trigger bar come out of the trigger housing, which is here. That can be done just by carefully, you want to lift this up past the top of the connector, and then just kind of turn it gently sideways, and it will come out. And that is the trigger bar right there. We have the actual trigger spring is sitting inside here, and that comes out. We want to push the spring this way, and this little plastic piece comes out. We want to push it up into this notch, and then the whole thing will come out. You can use your Glock tool, get a little leverage on it, push it this way, that little piece comes out. Push it out, push it up into that slot, and then it comes out the back. Alright, and this is your trigger spring, and this actually can come apart even more. If you press this, turn the black piece, and the trigger spring comes right apart like that. So those are all of the parts removed from your Glock 17 Gen 5. Let's not forget the magazine. The Glock magazines are notoriously difficult to disassemble. Most magazines, you just press this button in with a push pin or something and then push the base plate off. But Glock has these tabs on both sides which make it difficult to get the base plate off. So what you need to kind of do is get a Glock magazine disassembly tool, which is this right here, and this makes it very easy. You do have to kind of force it off, so you just press the pin in here, make sure you're holding it nice and straight like that, and just like a wishbone push those together and it pulls the base plate off. Now make sure you have your thumb over top because it's going to want to launch that out, and then your insert, and then you can pull out your magazine spring and follower is attached. This does come apart if you want to clean it, and it snaps right back in there. And then you have your magazine tube, and that's how you disassemble your Glock magazine. We're going to do a complete Glock reassembly. This is a Glock 17 Gen 5. I've taken every possible part off of this Glock except for the rear sight. I didn't want to have to go to the range to readjust that. To do a complete reassembly, you're going to need needle nose pliers, possibly a Glock pin tool, a small screwdriver, a Glock front sight tool. This is specially made to fit the front sight screw. You may possibly need a small hammer. This is not a small hammer, but this hammer will do the trick, preferably with a plastic or soft tips on it. So let's get started with the trigger assembly. Alright, so the trigger assembly, so you first want to take this piece. This is part of the trigger spring assembly. So that goes on here just like that. And then you can just fit the plastic piece through there and turn it 90 degrees so that it ends up looking just like this. Then this assembly goes into the housing here, and it's going to go in this way. Alright, so we want to push it in until this piece comes out of this hole, slide it down, and then it's going to kind of snap into this hole and stay put. Put it in here like this, and see, push on it till it pokes out there, and then slide that down so it gets stuck in that spot right there, and it's going to end up looking just like this. So your little stirrup is in there like that. Alright, now the next piece that goes on to your housing assembly is the connector, and the connector sits just like this. Kind of has an outline right here. So this piece just goes into this slot. You can usually just press that in with your thumb as far in as it goes, and just like that. It's okay if that bends out a little. That's going to be compressed and held in place when it's put back into the frame. Alright, next we want to connect the trigger and trigger bar to the trigger housing assembly. So this actually goes this way with the ejector pointing toward the trigger. So first thing we want to do, if this little stirrup is kind of down, kind of low like this one is, you just want to get in here and kind of get that up here so it's a little bit higher up in there. Alright, so once that's in there, you want to take this cruciform here, and this piece here goes into the stirrup. So you just need to kind of put it in at a little bit of an angle like this, get that caught under the stirrup, and then once that's under the stirrup, this needs to go into this slot in the back. So without bending anything, just kind of move things around a little till that goes into that slot, and then everything kind of fits together like that. Alright, and this is going to be compressed. This is going to be under there, but this is going to be compressed when you put it into the frame. So this is how this should look. Before we put the trigger housing and trigger back into the frame, you can do it now if you want, but before we do that, it's a little easier to put the magazine release spring and magazine release back in. You want your magazine release to sit in this orientation if you're a right-handed shooter. If you're a left-handed shooter, we want to put it in the opposite way, but that's another video. So you want to put it in so it's just sitting in place like this. Now you want to hold on to that and kind of hold it from moving back and forth. Then you get your needle nose pliers on either end of this spring. And then we're going to put the spring down into the bottom of the V-notch, just straight down in there. Push it down in as far as it goes, and it's going to look just like that. Right, this is still loose, so you want to press on this side to make sure that it doesn't move on you when you do the next part. So press here, get a screwdriver, get some leverage on the top of that pin toward the top, and you want to push that back this way so that it pops back behind the magazine release button. And when you're done, it should work like this. And when we're done putting the whole thing back together, we're going to test that as well. The next thing that might be easy to put in now before we put the trigger back in is the slide lock mechanism. First, let's put the slide lock spring in place. Alright, that sits in there just like that. Now, this goes in this orientation with the part number facing the back. It's got a little ridge here that needs to be facing the back of the gun. Okay, and then this slides in either side here like this. So what you're going to want to do is hold this spring down. Carefully, don't launch this across the room, and make sure you have eye protection on in case you launch this into your face. Alright, so hold this down as far as it goes. Slide this in till you get it captured like that a little bit. Alright, and now put your finger in there and kind of straighten things out. Okay, and push this down nice and flat so it goes all the way through. Then the spring will push the slide stop back up into place just like that. Alright, that's how that should look. Now we can put the trigger housing and trigger assembly back in the gun. So hold the trigger and trigger assembly so both of these are pointing straight down. And then this sits in the back of the gun, and the trigger just kind of falls right down through like that. Okay, so everything sits like this, and this sits just a little higher than the frame, as you can see there. And if you look through this hole, you want to make sure it's clear. You want to make sure things are lined up. See, that'll line it up so you can see right clear through that hole there. Now if you have a beaver tail like I do, put that in place at this point. That kind of snaps on there. Make sure you can still see through that hole, because now we're going to put our trigger housing pin through that hole to hold everything together. So just kind of push it in as far as you can with your finger. I find that I have to just lightly tap this. Don't tap it too hard because it's only a polymer. You don't want to bend it. So just tap it very lightly. You might have to tap it a bunch of times. And then it's going to go like that. It's not quite even. I'm just going to push that a little bit more. It's a little depressed on this side and a little depressed on that side, so it's about even. So that's perfect. Alright, so next we want to put in the slide stop assembly. So it just kind of sits down right here, and these holes straddle the trigger, so it sits in there just like that. And you should be able to see clear through this hole all the time because we're looking to line everything up. And now the locking block is going to go in there, and that also lines up with that hole. So this just pushes in right here, and if you push that all the way down, it'll line up with the rest of the items in there, and you'll be able to see straight through there. So now we can put the trigger pin back in. Either side, doesn't matter. Set that in there, and you might be able to push that. If not, just light taps from the hammer. Just lightly tap that in there. Alright, and that should go a little bit further than that. I'm just going to use this and just a light tap. I want the pin to be even, pretty even on both sides. Now we have the frame completely put back together. Now let's work on the slide. Okay, first let's start by putting the firing pin assembly back together if you took that apart. If not, you can skip to the next section. So we're just going to put this back together. The firing pin itself goes into this spacer sleeve this way. Okay, that's pretty simple. Then the next thing is the spring. It doesn't matter which end, the spring is the same on both ends. And then you want to hold it this way. We're going to push down on the spring, which is a pretty strong spring, and then we're going to put these two spring cups into place. So either wear gloves or get something to hold this with, because it hurts a little bit to hold that down kind of steady like that. So what we're going to do, if you push it down, and you might want to move this up to give you more space here. So then I'm going to take 1/2 of the cup, put it around the back, and I use my finger to kind of hold that in place. The other cup goes on the front, so that makes a complete both halves, and then let up on the spring a little bit, and if you get it right, it'll end up looking just like that. Alright, so that's the firing pin reassembly. Okay, before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and put the front sight back on to the gun. So that's going to go on just like that, and then we're going to take the special front sight wrench, just get that lined up and screw that in. Very easy. Now you don't want to over tighten that because it is only a polymer part, so just get it to where it's snug and just leave it there, as you can easily strip out the polymer threads inside the front sight. Alright, so now we're going to put on the firing pin safety spring and the extractor kind of at the same time, because they kind of like lock into each other to keep things put together. So this firing pin safety, there's a little flat side right here, and that side goes into the slide this way. Put the spring in there. Now you want to be careful the spring doesn't fall out while you're putting it in. Put that straight in the opening there. You can look in there to make sure your spring is not visible. It should be underneath. Keep your finger over that because the spring might push it out. And if you look down inside here, there's a hole on this side. Your extractor looks like this. It's got a round part over here. So hold it this way, and it kind of drops right in there like that. You may have to push this up and down a little bit until this drops all the way in place. It should be in, so it's not popping out here. See, that's all the way in there, and you might have to push this down for that to happen. So now the extractor is holding this firing pin safety in place, but keep your finger over it anyway so it doesn't pop out on you before you're ready. Alright, so next we're going to put in the extractor depressor plunger, which is this piece right here, and it's going to go into this hole right here, and it's going to go this way with the black piece out. So we're going to slide that right in here. All right, it's going to look like that. And you can see that in this little slot here. And what this does is puts pressure on the extractor to hold it in place and allow it to move back and forth a little bit as needed. Okay, and then next we're going to put in the firing pin or striker assembly, and that slides in here with this little lug sticking up. It goes into that slot. So now these two pieces are in place, and the next thing we need to do is put on the slide cover plate, and this slides in the back here. Just line it up in those slots and it starts to go in, but you have a couple things in the way. Alright, so what you want to do is press down on this spacer just enough so you can push this cover a little bit further up. So press it down just enough so you can push the cover. See, the cover is partly covering that plunger, but it can't go any further because of the extractor pin. So get your Glock tool and you want to push straight down on this pin as you press the slide further in. So that would just look just like this. All right, and now the cover is just about on. Press it all the way on like that, and there you have it. So just to make sure the firing pin is in there properly, a couple quick tests here. So you want to push this back. You should feel spring pressure as you push it back. Don't let go of it, just push it back and let it back up. You should feel nice spring pressure there. The firing pin should not protrude through the breech face right there. Even if you press forward on the firing pin, it shouldn't come through there unless you press on the safety. If you press the safety down and push forward, now it comes through, and that's when it can fire a round. If you let go of the plunger and you push back, everything should snap in place, and now you should not be able to push that through again. The other test is the firing pin channel. That's where the firing pin sits, in the channel. So if you were to hold the slide and push this down and kind of shake it back and forth, you should hear the firing pin kind of loosely bouncing back and forth in there. And that's normal, that's what you want. So now we can put the barrel back in. This is assuming that you have lubricated and cleaned everything before you put it all back together, but that's a different video. I'm just showing you how to put it back together right now. And then make sure the guide rod is sitting down nice and straight and parallel with the slide like that. Line it up on the frame, slide it on carefully. Don't let your ejector scratch the back of your gun. And bring it up like that. Push the slide on all the way. Lock it up like that. Make sure everything looks good. And now release the slide. Alright, your gun is now back together. Alright, now we're going to reassemble the Glock magazine. This is a standard 17 round magazine, and we're just going to assemble it here to show you how it goes together. The follower goes in this angle, so it looks like this in the top here. So you just push that in through the bottom like so, and then this insert follows the shape of the bottom of the magazine. So it looks like this. So you want to hold that on, and actually you want to do it this way. So the base plate slides on to the more narrow side of the magazine. So it's going to slide on like this. You want to press this down underneath of it so it slides on like that. Now you have the two notches down here, so it makes it a little bit difficult to push this on. So you just need to give it a good push there. It gets past those little edges there, and it snaps in place. Very simple. Once the magazine is back together, just make sure that the follower moves up and down properly. And at the end of this video, there will be a link in the corner for a function and safety check video, which I will show you how you can test the magazine to make sure everything is working properly. Next thing we want to do is go to this video up here, which is a function and safety check that you want to run through real quick to make sure everything is working properly on your Glock before you carry it or take it to the range. All right, and that is it. That is the complete reassembly of a Glock 17 Gen 5. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button below. Please subscribe. Please check out the tools and parts in the description below. And thank you so much for watching.